This is video 7 of our squat rack series in Fusion 360. In this video, we're going to learn how to create these J-hooks and make them fully functional. The first thing I want you to do is start a new sketch on this front face of the right front height. Let's go up towards the top. Let's hit P on our keyboard for project geometry. Let's select one of the circles close to the top, not too close though, and project it, and hit OK. Then we'll finish our sketch, and we're going to extrude this circle. And let's go back. And the question is how far back do we want to go? So let's look at our image. If we look at the dimensions of this J-hook that I found online, we use that 1-inch diameter, but the distance it goes is 2.2 inches, we can see from this side view. Since we made this frame 2.5 inches, we're going to need to adjust these dimensions just a little bit, because I do need the rod to go all the way through both holes, if you think about it. If we look at this from the side view, it should be clear that it needs to go through both holes. So let's change this extrusion from 2.2 to 2.7. And I do want it to go in the negative direction, so let's add the negative sign in front of it. And let's make sure to make it a new component and hit OK. Then let's start a new sketch on the face of that new peg that we created. And let's find it. And let's grab our rectangle tool. I want you to line up your rectangle on the left side of this fillet over here, drag down below your circle to the right side of the fillet. And so you should have a total width of 2.5. And if we look back at our image, we'll see that the height of this is 4.6. And so let's give this a height of 4.6. And then the only question is, well, how far up and down do we make it? And so I think I just want to square this off with the top. When I take a look at this, it looks like it's closer to the top than the bottom. So what do I mean by square it off? Well, if this is perfectly centered, and it is, then it's 1.25 from the right or the left to this circle. So let's make it 0.125 from the top as well. 1.25. And I'm sorry if I said 0.125. I meant 1.25. But now we have a fully constrained sketch. I'm going to right click and hit cancel and finish my sketch. And I want to extrude this shape. Let's make sure to hit the rectangle and the circle. And how far does it extrude? It looks like it's 0.3 inches. Okay, so let's go 0.3. And it wants to join, but to make sure that it joins to the cylinder and not the front height, let's actually turn off the front height and make sure it says join and hit OK. And so hopefully you can see what we're building. We're building the front view of this. This is the back. We're building the front right now. So let's go to the front face and let's add that J shape. Let's start a sketch on this face and grab your rectangle tool. And I turned off the front height, but that's the back height that I'm seeing. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the back height as well. And I want you to grab your rectangle tool and connect it to the bottom left corner and drag it up until you hit the right edge. And so the only thing we have to do is give this a height. And since this is 0.3 wide here, I'm going to assume that it's 0.3 tall down here. And if you haven't figured it out yet, we're not adding this extra body right here just yet. We'll add that in a little bit. So I'm going to give this a dimension of 0.3 and finish my sketch. Then I'm going to start a sketch from the right face and move my screen back. And let's turn off this other front height back here. And I'm going to grab my line tool. Click on this bottom corner to the left, make sure it's horizontal, and then drag up and right click OK. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this shape to make a sweep. Well, how do we measure it? Well, this part is easy. It's just a little bit more than 1.8. Let's just call that 1.8 because it does look like it starts in front of this, but it also looks like it goes past this. So let's just call that dimension 1.8. But then it says the entire thing is 5.2 measured from the back. Okay, but we also said that this wasn't 2.2, this was 2.7. So let's make this distance 5.7. But how do I get that? Well, I'm going to measure from this point to this edge back here and just tell that to be 5.7. And we're still not fully constrained. So what other dimensions are there? Well, we have a height of 1.3 inches. Okay, so let's give from this point, not this line, but this point to this point and drag to the left. And let's tell that to be 1.3. And now we have a fully constrained sketch, but it is rounded off. So let's go ahead and add a fillet. Right click cancel and go to my fillet tool. And let's click on this corner. 0.5 might be a little big. Let's try 0.3. And that looks pretty good. Let's hit enter. And I'm going to finish my sketch. And I'm going to go to create and find my sweep tool. Select my profile and my path. And make sure you don't have parallel selected. Make sure you have perpendicular selected. And just make it a join and hit OK. And so let's take a look at this. It does look like there are other fillets here, so let's add some of them. Okay, so there's a fillet right here and a fillet here in the back. So let's grab the fillet tool. I'm going to click on this corner and go around to the back and click this corner. And let's tell both of those to be the same fillet. So we'll just make that 0.3 and hit enter. And what else do we got? It looks like it's filleted around these corners as well. And so we can grab our fillet tool and let's click on these 4 corners. And let's try 0.3 and that looks like it might be a little big. Maybe switch it to 0.2 and that looks a little bit better. And now you're starting to see this J shape. So let's go ahead and change this component name to J hook. And so what else do we need to add? Well, we need to add this piece here on the back that wraps around our front height. Let's go ahead and turn on that front height on the right side. Make sure you have the right one turned on by changing your view. And I'm going to start a sketch on the side of my J hook here. And move back to where we're supposed to be. And let's grab our rectangle tool. And I want to lock it onto this front edge of this J hook. Try not to find that center point. And click down and drag. And let's add some dimensions. I want this to be 0.3 wide back here. But I actually want an extra gap because we don't want it to fit perfectly. We want it to be just slightly bigger than this. And hopefully that'll be clear why we do this in a second. But I'm going to dimension from this edge to this edge. And I'm going to tell it to be slightly bigger than 0.3. Let's make it 0.325 and hit enter. Okay, then what else? Well, I'm going to give this a height. And let's look here. It looks like a little bit bigger than that, maybe. So let's make it 1.5. And then let's go ahead and dimension it from this edge as well, a height. And let's just go with 0.3 because when I look at it, it looks like it's about the distance from here to here is, maybe it's a little bit bigger, but it's not going to be perfect and that's okay. It looks about right. And then let's finish our sketch. And I'm going to hit extrude and I'm going to get all 3 rectangles. But again, I'm going to turn off this front height because I don't want it to accidentally join to my front height. And I'm going to change this to a join. And I'm going to tell it to go 0.3 again and hit OK. And then we want to add this extra edge that wraps around the front height. So let's go around to the other side. And let's find our J-hook here. And let's start a sketch on, and if you can't see, we're on the left side over here. Let's start a sketch on this inside face from the left. And grab your rectangle tool, and from the bottom left corner, drag it up to the tip top, right click OK, and let's tell it to be 0.3 inches wide. Finish sketch, and then we're going to extrude it, and let's change it from a distance to object, and let's click on this face right here so that it's exactly the same length, and hit OK. And let's turn on that second front height on the right side. And I want you to notice this very small gap. If I click on this top left corner here, not the left face, not the top face, but the corner, it'll center perfectly. And you'll notice this tiny gap here. That was that extra 0.025 that we added in this sketch before. If we go back to that sketch. So I'm going to go back 2 sketches in my timeline and double click on it. And you can see that was that 0.325. That's that extra gap there that we created. I'm going to go ahead and finish sketch and go to my home view. And let's add these extra fillets that we see. Like there's 2 here, and then there's another one here. And I can imagine there's another one on that other side as well. So let's grab our fillet tool. And let's give these 2 edges a fillet of 0.3. Just because they're a little bit bigger like these 2 were down here. And then let's go around to the back again. Let's zoom out so I can see what I'm looking at here. And let's add 2 fillets here as well. And since these are smaller edges, let's tell them to be 0.2 like the other smaller edges, and hit OK. And then from the left side here, let's zoom in again. From the left side here, let's start a sketch on this side face. And again, zoom out and find where we're sketching. And I'm going to open up my project geometry tool. So I'm going to go to create, project, P, and I want to project these edges here. But I also want to make sure I get these fillets at the ends. So I've got the entire inside face projected, and hit OK. And then I want to find my offset tool and modify, and click on those projected edges. And let's drag it in. And how far does it drag in? Well, we're creating this extra body right here. Let me zoom in a little bit. This extra body right here. And it looks like it's a little bit smaller than this. So let's just call it 0.2 since the other one was 0.3. So 0.2. And let's make sure we add a negative so that it goes forward, and hit OK. And then grab your line tool and just connect the dots here and connect the dots down here. And now we have a full sketch. Let's finish it. And let's extrude and go to object again. Let's go to the other side and click on this face right here. And this time tell it to be a new body, not a join, and hit OK. And I don't want it to be a new component. I do want it to be a separate body, just to be clear. And why? Well, I want it to be connected to this, but I do want it to be clearly separate, as it is here when we look at it. Okay, and it looks like those corners didn't come with us. Let's go ahead and add them again. Let's click fillet and click on these 4 edges. And if I'm not mistaken, these other fillets were 0.2, so let's make a match with a 0.2 fillet. Perfect. And then just to differentiate, let's hit A on our keyboard for appearance. And let's grab that same black steel satin that we created in the last video. And let's drag it not to the front body, but the back body. And hit close. And that's looking good. And just to differentiate the 2 bodies well in my assembly, I'm going to keep this gray and let this stay black, just so you can see the difference. And I know it's not exact, I kind of like it like this. Okay, and then what else do we need to do? Well, we need another one on the other side, and luckily we have our mirror tool. So let's go ahead and turn on our second front height. And let's go to create, mirror. Make sure components is selected, and let's select the component. And let's tell it to go across the center plane down here. And hit OK. And it looks like it didn't come with the extra body. Why didn't it come with the extra body? If I click on it and look over here in my browser, you'll see that it actually created an extra body in the assembly as opposed to inside my JHook, okay? No big deal. Let's go ahead and drag it down. And that didn't bring it with us. Well, that's because it happened after our timeline, so let's undo that. And then let's go back in time and try it. So I'm just going to bring my timeline back before the mirror, and let's try to drag it. And it seems to not be working. Maybe you can't move bodies when you move backwards in your timeline. Maybe that feature just doesn't work in this setting. Okay, so we can do one more thing. Let's move it forward in time, and let's right click on that mirror and delete it. And then let's try to drag this body down to our JHook, and it looks like that worked. And then let's create our mirror again. And one more time, select that component and select that middle plane and hit OK. And it looks like it came with us that time. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on my back heights as well. The only thing we have left to do is to assemble it on so that it works like it does in this assembly, and that's pretty easy. So let's go back. I'm going to go to the back corner view, and let's do an as built joint. So we'll go to Assemble, As Built, or you could just hit Shift J, and let's select both of these components and make sure you have cylindrical selected, and then select the center circle as your snap. Then on the rotation part of your cylindrical joint, let's give it a min, a max, and a rest. So for the min, let's start it at 0 degrees, but I want it to go up 90. And I don't want it to go up that way. That should be clear, and if it's not, it'll be clear in a second. Let's make this 0 for the max, and let's make the minimum negative 90 so that it rotates the other way. Because if you've ever played with these JHooks, then you know you have to rotate them this way to take these off and to put these on. And let's make the rest 0 degrees, just so gravity works. And so if I preview it, you'll see that it goes up and down, but it'll stay at 0 degrees as its rest so that it drops like gravity's acting on it. Then change to your slide, and let's give it a min and max here as well. Let's see, for the minimum, let's say we'll leave that at 0, and for the maximum, I want it to go a little bit past this bar, so this is 2.5, so let's make it 3. And it looks like it's going backwards, so let's make the max 0 then, and the minimum negative 3. Perfect. And then I don't want it having a rest on the slide, and so hit OK. And so now we can play with it. No, we can't. Let me revert that back, and let's ground our second front height here. So I'm going to right click, and you can't see it in the video, I'm sorry, but if you go up far enough in this menu, you'll see the ground feature. So go ahead and click that and get that pin, and then you can play with it. Okay, it slides back and forth and it spins around. But we can do one better. Let's revert it, and let's go to Assemble again and add a context set. Now that doesn't do anything by itself, but now I have context sets enabled, so I can tell these two to have a context set. So I'm going to right click on this context set and add a new one. And I'm going to click on these two bodies and hit OK. So now this can't go inside of this. And you might say, why don't we just turn on all contacts? Well, that kind of slows Fusion down a little bit. Let's just put it down where we want it. So now I can turn it and drag it forward and back. And when it gets all the way forward, I can drop it. But I can't bring it forward and back unless I turn it like in the real world, which is really cool. And then I'm going to go to the other side and do the exact same thing. So let's go to an as-built joint and click on these two components and make this the snap center. Make sure it says cylindrical. And the same thing. Let's give it a minimum and a maximum. We'll say the minimum is 0 and the maximum is 90. Let's see if it works on this side. It looks like, is that turning the right way? It looks like it is, yes. And if it's not, just flip it. Make this 0 and make this negative 90. And then let's make a rest 0 degrees again. And let's go to slide And let's give this a minimum and a maximum as well. And the same thing, let's make the maximum 3. And again, that's going backwards. So let's make the maximum 0 and the minimum -3. And hit OK. And then, oops, I forgot to ground again. So let's click on this. Right click on this other front height and go up to ground. And again, I know you can't see it in the video, but it's up there. You can find it in your own. And make sure you got that red pin. And then we can play with it. And what's the difference between having context sets and not? Well, it can slide through the object. And we don't want that. We want it to obey the laws of physics. So let's right click on context sets and go to new context set. And select these two and hit OK. And let's hit revert. And let's play with it. And we can see that if we can drag it up all the way, we can bring it forward and back. And drop it and it's out. And then we can bring it up all the way and bring it back. And it's back on. And if you can't get it back, just hit revert and it'll go back on its own. And wow, that video was a little bit longer than I had intended, but hopefully you learned a lot. And let's go ahead and save our progress. And I will see you in the next video.